Well, I've got this old gauge here I took out of my cluster, and I got a new sending unit. I'm going to try to cut it off, solder it onto here. I couldn't find a oil sending unit or line, but I did get a piece of brake line in here. I cut it off and soldered it once, and I plugged up that little tiny line. So I cut it back a little more, and I got it soldered on there good, and then I put a nut and a bunch of JB weld, because that line is real small and it's flexy. So what I tried to do was seal this gauge up solid. So it is sealed up solid, but the problem is that I've got 3-4 inches here that's going to stick out of my dash. It is working, but I think that's kind of sticking out a little far. The thing is, I want to shove that small line way up in here and try to solder it on the end. I could actually bend it once it's in. Oh man, okay, I got it out. And this works good. I tried it with air pressure and it's moving the dial and it's all loose. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to clean this up and try to take a little drill bit or something and clean it out real good so it'll solder. Put about 2 or 3 inches of line up in here and solder it on the end. You got to put those bulbs are full of ether, so you put the bulb down in a pan of ice and salt. It keeps it shrinked, and you're just soldering on this far end way away from the bulb. I'll set it down on the floor, it's plenty long, and try to mark this up before I cut it, and see what I can do about getting this thing soldered. We'll see. Worst I can do is ruin the little capillary and lose the ether. Have to buy another gauge. Well, I got this I think soldered good. I got the sending unit down there in a bucket of ice water. I couldn't smell anything, so I don't think I lost any fluid. What I'm going to do now is just put a little piece of metal in here, a little piece of wire or something, and I'm going to wrap it real tight with this little tiny wire and JB weld it, so that'll give me a pretty strong joint there. Well, mix me up some JB weld, and I wrapped a piece of rebar wire tie wire around it, and then I wrapped a little tiny piece of wire around the whole thing, and then I'm going to JB weld it for 2 reasons. One is going to make it a lot stronger, and number 2 is going to probably stop any leaks that I have. I've still got it down in the ice, so I'll put some of this JB weld on here, see what happens. Well, I covered that real good with JB weld, and I just heated it up with a lighter a little bit so it'll get it runny. And I should just put a little piece of tobacco run on my JB weld. Looks like this camera looks real good up close. But anyway, that ought to give me something pretty solid. And I can take a couple pieces of pliers or something here once I get the gauge in and see where it's going to go. And maybe bend a little 90 in there, because this brake line's pretty easy to bend. It's kind of a copper coated steel. As long as you're careful with it, I'll be right. I don't think I need any worry about any kinks. And my little gauge is still returning to about 90 degrees or so. I'll let this harden up a little bit. This is JB Quick, so probably about 10 minutes it's going to be good enough to take it out of the ice and see if this was all just a big waste of time or not. Well, here's our test. We got a pot of water here on the stove. I turned the wrong burner on, and kind of burnt the plastic up on my little thing, but I shouldn't hurt it. We'll just hopefully when it boils I'll get to about 212. I can probably adjust this little gauge. The little arm in here does move it. And when I blew in it with air, the gauge was moving. That's before I made this second thing here. So we'll just wait and see. So far they're not moving or anything, but I doubt if that water's hot yet. Well, hallelujah. Come up 140. 150. Water's starting to steam. I think we're a ways away from boiling, but it's pretty hot. There's 160. 170. Can't really see what this is saying. I'll look in the camera. Looks like we're up to about 180. Still not boiling yet. Right about 180. Doesn't seem to be getting any hotter. And water is boiling. So it should be 212. Guess I can try to adjust that just a little. Not sure which way I'd go with it. Quite a bit that way. I'm just going to leave this on low. About 2 and keep that water boiling. Maybe a little more. Looks like it stopped at 180. All right, I'm gonna try to find me a little screwdriver and see if I can adjust it. Well, I got it where it's at 212, boiling nicely. So we're pretty close, might be running a little low. We'll just turn this thing off. $2.12. I just bent a little bitty tab in there. I'm going to throw a little bit of cold water in there and see what happens. Well, that brought it immediately to 200. $205, something like that. That water's still awfully hot. So now, I guess I'll put cold water in it and see what happens. Well, I laid it in a bucket of cold water. Don't want to go down much. I feel there's a lot of pressure in that gauge. Well, not really moving. That thing should be cold enough now to be well below 200 or whatever it is. Yeah, it's at 180. I don't know if my soldering joints leaked. Lost some ether. I'm going to try to reset it back to where it's a low end of the scale. Can't get it below 140 now. Well, managed to get it bent down to nothing. Let's try hot water again. Well, it's moving. It's up to 140. The pot's making a little noise. I can just barely stick my finger in it, so it's a little over 100. So it's climbing up towards 160. Better set up here. Probably going to show boiling right at 180 again. I'm starting to see a few bubbles in the pot. It just started boiling. Yeah, it's boiling good now. So it looks like 160 is my boiling point. Maybe 170. So the range of this gauge is not very not very much. That looks like a standard size bubble to me. So I think this is kind of a success, and kind of a not a success. I was able to get this stuff all hooked up without it leaking, but it's just not moving the gauge far enough to do me any good. So My next thing would be to buy another gauge. I'm pretty sure I can't solder this one back together. And try to get another black face gauge inside the dash cluster. I'll do some measuring and see what I can find out. Well, I think I found out what the problem was. This big old piece of brake line that's 4 inches long, that's probably a quarter of the volume of this whole Bourdon assembly. So it's probably just building up in that tube and not really putting pressure into this. Way I could find out, I suppose, is cut this line off. Take an inch out of it. But it is a 2-inch gauge. I mean, I hate to run it. I got it set now where whatever it's pointing at there, I can't read it without my glasses. 120 to 200. So it's got about an 80-degree range. So it is working. It's just not accurate. If I could get in there and change this leverage on it, that would probably work. But I don't really see how I can do that without replacing some of this little tiny stuff with a shorter arm. So the same amount of movement here on the tube would move the needle more. If I shorten that little arm, all that will do is just change where the needle's pointing. It won't change the range at all. So anyway, I don't know what I'll do with this. I really don't want to take it out. You know, this is the original gauge. I think my best bet is to try to shorten this and cut that off, and then use a piece of bigger pipe over the outside of it, and make this a much tighter connection. I have to think about that a while.